This has Steelers fans absolutely livid as following an absolutely disappointing trade deadline, a deadline in which reports indicated that Omar was going all in, that they were making an aggressive push for a wide receiver ahead of the end of the deadline. They come out and they not only do nothing, but some information has leaked surrounding why the Steelers did nothing that not only has fans fired up, but a lot of them, quite frankly, livid. We're going to break that down as well as discuss a few injury updates and other updates ahead of their big game Sunday. But folks, things took a wild turn. But before we get into it all, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Ladies and gentlemen, your guys' support has been unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the conversation I was hoping to be having with you guys at 4 p.m. Eastern. It is official. The Steelers are standing pat at the day of the deadline. They made one trade for Kyle Dugger last week. And the only trade that they made, folks, was for Kyle Dugger. At least, the only notable huge move. And in a day that was filled with tons and tons of speculation, whether that be Jakobi Meyers, who was ultimately traded, and the Steelers could have matched that offer. They chose not to. Whether that was obviously a lot of different areas for them to improve here. I mean, the Jets made tons of trades. I mean, Quinnen got traded. It was a wild one. The Steelers decided to stay pat, and people are livid. Now, Mike Tomlin came out earlier this afternoon and was talking about the trade deadline and basically came out and said with a grin, "I love shopping. I'm excited to see what the front office does," basically paraphrasing that. And they both went window shopping, and they weren't able to come to terms with any deal. And we have some information as to why here, which we'll dive into in a minute. But this is surprising to me. They're coming off of a crucial win against the Colts. The Colts went out and got a very, very good player. They had an elite cornerback, at least at one point, had an elite season. They gave up 2 first-round picks. Teams across the teams within the division, Trey Hendrickson stays put in Cincinnati. And then, of course, the Ravens didn't make a ton of moves today. There wasn't a ton of moves within the division. But this is a chance where Pittsburgh could have gone out and went with, went with the aggressive approach rather, and could have got somebody that we know they wanted to in a wide receiver. You can see here from Kevin Adams Lowell, trade lines comes to pass, and it always comes to pass in Pittsburgh. But Steelers linked to several different players. Steelers being very aggressive. Steelers ultimately make no moves. I hate this team. You better go sign Asante Samuel Jr. We're gonna have tons of videos on other players they can sign, because now I guess free agency opens. You can see, not free agency, but you can see here the waiver wire. Players who are exposed to the waivers are opened up. We'll have another video later tonight on some moves that they are making and things like that, and that they have made some new signings. But folks, it's a disappointing day for me, and I was really expecting, with the way that this team has performed lately, I mentioned it even in the last video and in the last game, the announcers were saying, okay, it's clear they need at least one more wide receiver. Calvin Austin wasn't cutting it. Roman Wilson certainly wasn't cutting it. We have some comments from Mike Tomlin on Roman Wilson, which we'll dive into in a minute. But clearly they trust Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Now, that's the guy that they made. They made that signing official, so maybe that's their pseudo pickup. And I loved the acquisition of Kyle Dugger. I think it was an absolute robbery, and I thought that was a really good move. But you needed to complement that with more moves. And it did come out that the Dolphins did listen to calls for Jaylen Waddle. They ultimately didn't trade him. They wanted a first-round pick, plus that was too rich for most receiver-needy teams. So that makes sense. If I'm the Steelers, I'm not giving up the first-round pick for Jaylen Waddle, right? You need to save it for the potential of a quarterback, in the upcoming draft. And we don't know exactly what their plan is, whether that's to throw Will Howard out there next year and hold on to their pick, draft, some an O-lineman, depending on what's available, depending on this draft. But I'm disappointed. And the deadline passed. The Steelers stay put in a time where they're first in the division. Now, the good news is there wasn't a ton of crazy moves within the division, but at the same time, a lot of other teams got a lot better. The New York Jets had an absolute fire sale, and I thought they were going to trade away Breece Hall. They didn't. And it was a crazy one, right? And you're at a point now where Jakobi Meyers went to Jacksonville for a 4th and a 6th. And I want you guys to let me know down below, would you have done that deal? A 4th and a 6th for Jakobi Meyers? Because I don't think I would have, though he is an expiring deal, an expiring contract. I think they like Marquez Valdes-Scantling a lot. And he's obviously in the practice squad right now, and obviously he'll get elevated. But, Aaron Rodgers loves MVS, and I think that they might make him the WR2 and then have Calvin Austin as a WR3 and have Roman Wilson as someone who, goes in occasionally. But you can see here from 4 hours ago from Jack Sperry, realistic wide receiver targets that Pittsburgh could still possibly land before the deadline today after missing out on Jakobi Meyers. And looking at the guys who got traded on this list, Calvin Ridley, Deebo Samuel, a lot of these guys stayed put. Rashid Shaheed got traded, which I also thought would have made a lot of sense. But I think once they signed Marquez Valdes-Scantling, they almost wanted to stay put, which is an interesting, proposition. Clearly, Aaron Rodgers has a ton of faith in MVS, which makes some sense, right? And they've had experience in the past together. They were very good in Green Bay together. All these different things can be true. But at the same time, I mean, the Chiefs didn't make any moves. A lot of different things there. It's the Broncos didn't make moves. The Buccaneers made an interesting move, but not a lot of teams went out and made a ton of moves, and that makes things very interesting for this upcoming season. You can see this here. If the Steelers didn't want to outbid Jacksonville on what ends up being a 4th and a 6th, that probably tells us Pittsburgh likely isn't looking to trade a top 4-round pick for any wide receiver today. If Omar is going to make a move, and he may not, which he didn't, he'll probably be more in the market for a deal that costs a 5th, just like the Mike Williams trade last year. Make no mistake, Pittsburgh is not desperate to make a move at wide receiver today, and if they can't get someone at their price, they're not going to feel obligated to overpay for someone just to make a move. And this is what happened, right? Once they didn't make a trade for Jacoby Myers, and they were reportedly the second team, I mean, they probably offered, 5th and a 6th, and they probably would have had to pay more than the Jaguars did, of course. Would you guys think about this? And would you guys have done the 4th and the 6th? But do you think they should have, traded a 3rd, traded a 2nd? I mean, the Steelers have a lot of picks in the upcoming draft. They could have made a move. Now, they keep them. You can obviously make a move in the offseason, but I'm not worried about the offseason. I'm worried about winning this year. You look at their depth chart. You look at who you have. The running back room is pretty solid. Obviously, Kenneth Gainwell, love-hate relationship there. DK Metcalf is dominant, only had 6 yards last game, but he's a WR1. Calvin Austin, can he be that WR2? I don't know, but you have Marquez Valdez-Scantling now who can slide into the WR2 spot, and then, of course, you move Calvin Austin down to the WR3. That takes Roman Wilson out of it. But this team loves using their jumbo sets with Jonnu, Pat Freiermuth, and Darnell Washington, and internally they were probably thinking, hey, we have something that's really good here with Aaron Rodgers and those 3 tight ends. Why do we need to pay a ton of assets to go out and get a wide receiver that we're probably not going to use anyway? They don't use DK Metcalf a ton anyway compared to how some other teams use their WR1. And I'm fine with it. If they didn't want to overpay. And it's a little bit disappointing, of course, not being able to go all in at a time where you lead the division. But I'm going to trust Omar Khan for now. And they didn't want to go out and get a guy like Rashid Shaheed. They didn't want to go out and get a guy like Jacoby Myers because the prices were too high. And I'm sure we'll hear from Omar Khan and things like that at some point potentially about why they didn't make a move. But at the end of the day, it is very interesting that not a lot of these teams made some moves, and obviously after the George Pickens trade, people are a little bit upset, talking about how it's a disaster. It is interesting, but at least we're not the Bengals holding on to Trey Hendrickson in a blow-up year. But a couple different things here as well before I wrap up. Just want to touch on this. Mike Tomlin, we'll have a full video tonight. There's lots of moves and lots of updates that are happening / have happened. Mike Tomlin was praising Roman Wilson's trajectory, but felt the need to note the big mistakes Sunday, other than that boneheaded lack of ball security late. So it's good that internally they're going to handle that lack of ball security, but also keeping the praise on for Roman Wilson, who's looked decent, as of the past few games, not quite where they need to be, especially for a team that's competing for the division. But at the end of the day, let me know down below what your thoughts are on the lack of moves. A very disappointing day, but one that I think makes some sense if you look at it from the an outsider looking in. But it sucks. Hopefully the Steelers can take care of business on Sunday. You guys are beasts.